Join me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast to hear fascinating stories every week from the inspiring people behind the science. In this episode of Lab Matters with me, Harriet Gould, Charley Maxwell tells us about choosing a technical career over what might have been the good life on his parents' farm. Today, I am joined by Charley Maxwell. Charley is the managing director of Orion GXP. It's a consultancy firm, and Charley specializes in the pharmaceutical sector. Now, we're going to get to know Charley a little bit more today and go back through the archives to where he grew up in Dublin. Is that right? Did you grow up in Dublin, Charley?
Um, no, Harriet, it was Donegal, actually, up in the northwest of Ireland. Very much the west coast, the wild Atlantic way. But I've been all over, so yeah, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
My history, many travels.
So take us a little bit back to Donegal. What's your first memory over there?
I grew up on a dairy farm, actually, so it was all farming. It was cattle, sheep, looking after the land, helping my dad, mum and dad, run a busy farm. Um, they were very much, don't go into farming. You have to be academic, and pushed me really hard to do well at school. So that I wouldn't have to work the land. And there's a thing in Ireland that's more seeing, sometimes landowners over here see it more as a horrible job, and try to push their kids not to do it, whereas it'd be the opposite, I think, in the UK.
Yeah, quite. There's a certain degree of pride, I think, in
Yeah,
being a farmer. I'm surprised to hear
yeah.
that. Yeah. So, how did you feel about that when they were trying to push you away from farming? Were you glad, or did you have a slight yearning to stay on the farm?
At different points through my life and through my career, I've kind of been, oh, would have been it would have been lovely. They when it's calving or lambing time, and it's spring, and it's lovely, and you're out bringing animals in from the fields and the sun is shining, farming seems lovely. But when it's miserable cold weather, and you're breaking ice in troughs, and trying to feed animals in freezing cold weather, it's not so nice. So I remember the hard times as well, and I know it's particularly on a dairy farm, it's a 365-day a year job. The cows have to be milked, and calves have to be fed, and all of that kind of stuff has to be done. So um it's very, very relentless. And I think that was what my father realized, and why he sort of pushed me to, go away and have a career instead.
Mm. So, at what age were you aware that you were going to have to be having a different focus to have a different career?
I guess it was around when I was about 10 or 11. My older sister had went to a quite a prestigious grammar school in Northern Ireland, and she had done well, gone off to university in Wales, and got her A levels and everything. So um, my mum was very keen that I would follow in her footsteps. So when she was doing her A levels, it's the I would have been just getting ready to sort of go to secondary school. So m- my mum sort of pushed me to do the 11 plus, and get into the same grammar school that my sister got into. And I knew from then on that I was going to be more sort of academically focused, and I'd be pushed to, yeah, in that direction. And university was always a thing. When you went to that particular school, it wasn't, are you going to go to university? It's, what university are you going to go to? And are you going to get into one of the prestigious ones? Are you going to go to university in Ireland? Are you going to go to university in Oxford, Cambridge, places like that? That was kind of where, the thought process when I went to grammar school.
Mm. And how did you decide? Because you went to Stirling University, is that?
Learning, yeah, yeah. Oh, it was kind of a funny one. I had a friend who he was my best mate all through grammar school, and I got held back a year. I it wasn't really a gap year. I started A levels, realized I had picked the wrong subject, so I was given the opportunity to restart lower sixth. I don't know what that is in the new year system in the UK. It's year 13 or something like that. But it was lower sixth and upper sixth when I went to grammar school, and I got a chance to restart. So I spent 3 years doing A levels rather than two.
What did you
And
choose? What did you choose?
I was doing physics and applied mathematics, and I just couldn't handle. There was just an awful lot of brain work with the physics. A level physics is the difference between GCSE and A levels. I just couldn't handle it. So I went back and switched to chemistry. I was really good at chemistry up to GCSE and was really good at biology. And I don't know why I picked physics. It was something in my head. Um,
Mm,
I think I had different career aspirations, but biochemistry, biology, chemistry, that kind of thing, I was good at it. So I went back and you know, changed. Um, and I think I did an easier mathematics course. I think they had us in one of the like Oxford ones, and but they put us instead into a different group, in which was yeah, which was different examination board. It was one
mm,
of the more modular ones where it was a little bit more bite size, so I was able to handle that better then the second time round.
mm.
So yeah, um that was the A level thing. So the friend had already went on to Stirling. And then I went over, and sort of camped out on his floor for did a bit of party. And when I was in upper sixth, and I was like, oh, I definitely want to go to this university, because it was I don't know if you've ever been to Stirling. It's a lovely big campus sort of out in the countryside, and you've got the Wallace Monument, and it's so idyllic. I just fell in love with it. And being a country boy, I think a country university kind of suited me as well.
Indeed, indeed. So you're really on your way by that point, and farming is just part of your childhood, and you're not wishing that you'd gone down that route at any point by now.
No, no, very occasionally I would feel a bit nostalgic about it, but I keep reminding myself it's a tough old business.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
How did you find that? You were behind a year, your friend was already there, and you joined it Sterling a year later.
Hmm.
How did you find it? Were you
I mean, I made completely new friends. I think I was one of those people that there was and this was common in the school that I went to. You were in, I grew up in Donegal, but the school was in Tyrone, just over the border, and you it was always a thing that you went off to university in England or Scotland or somewhere, and you lost track of your friends. It was almost like you knew that was going to happen. So made new friends at university. Same thing at the end of the 3 years there. Went off to a different part of Scotland, and lost track of. I think I've still a few people that I keep in touch with, but I might visit them once every couple of years. You move on again. But I
indeed?
loved Stirling. Yeah, it was really nice. It's great, and there's a lot of innovation there as well. They have like biopharma companies embedded on the campus as well. So there's a lot of sort of crossover between industry and academia there as well. It's certainly good that way. And the course I did was a nice segue into the career I followed then afterwards.
It sounds like you could have theoretically gone in any direction from where you were at Sterling. You could have.
Yeah, I mean, I did initially. I started off in medical devices. One of the first jobs I had was more syringes, medical devices, that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
I was, quickly able to fall back on the biochemistry that I did, and I worked in clinical supplies and clinical packaging. Quintiles, I worked for them shortly after that then as well. And then obviously when I moved back to Ireland, I moved more into in vitro diagnostics and into pharma eventually. So
Hmm.
there was a kind of a career progression there that kind of all started, I suppose, from that biochemistry course at Stirling.
Mm. But it wasn't the only one because you spent some time at Trinity College, Dublin as well.
Yeah. 2017 and 2018, I did the QP course there. Well, we call it the QP course. It's a master's in pharmaceutical manufacturing technology. It's a part-time course, but it's meant to be taken. It's meant to be when you're in like a senior quality role within a pharma company and you want to become a QP.
Mm.
So it's you're kind of drip fed the work, and it's bite-sized chunks so that you can have a full-time job alongside doing a master's.
Mm.
That's tough though. That's I talk about farming being tough. Trying to do a master's at one of the top universities in Ireland and do hold down a full-time job, like stressful full-time job. Um, I was operations quality manager for like a multinational at the time, so there was a lot of the day job as well was tough, as well as doing the MSc.
Mm.
You
It's
know.
not, yeah, a real challenge. So
Mm.
I've kind of, by including the education, I've kind of cut out a good 10 years. So let's go back to the start of your career. So beyond the medical devices, what made you realize that that wasn't the one?
Um, I, I, s- I suppose it was a small startup company. It was a novel kind of medical device with spring mechanism to retract the needle. It was around about the time of there was a lot of stuff in the press about HIV, sort of mid to late 90s. And this was a device that was meant to allow nurses in HIV and hepatitis wards to be able to administer drugs, and then the needle would retract into the device, and it'd be safe to handle. You wouldn't have the same sharps difficulties, but the technology maybe wasn't just quite there, and the startup failed.
Mm,
So I moved on into clinical, then
mm,
started
mm,
working with quintiles. But I did a stint both in the laboratory and the clinical packaging sites there in Midlothian, fairly close to Edinburgh, be about 20 or 30 miles outside, Bathgate um, Bathgate and Livingston.
mhm, mhm. And
So
you've worked at some bigger places as well. Abbott Diagnostics. I think quite a few people
I
have heard
did,
about
yeah.
Abbott.
So after quintiles, I suppose there was a thing happening in Ireland called the Celtic Tiger. You might have heard of it. That was like, everything was booming and Ireland was doing well, and they had slashed their corporate tax rate, and there was lots of new jobs. And I suppose I knew I was married by that stage as well. My wife's actually Scottish. She's from Livingston, near Edinburgh, and we had settled down and we had started a family. But I always knew that Ireland's a great place to live. There's a lovely quality of life, all that kind of stuff. It just at the time in the early 90s there were no jobs, and then all of a sudden there were jobs, and myself and my wife were looking at it and going, well, that's paying a lot more, and that job's paying a lot more. So then we looked at Abbott, we looked at Sligo in the northwest. It wasn't far from where my parents were, and we could go from a two up, two down terrace house in Scotland to a three-bed semi for the same price in Ireland. So it kind of became a no-brainer for us to I suppose it wasn't emigrate for me, it was go back home, but it was emigrate for my wife. So we up sticks and filled a Luton van one the Christmas that we came over, and off we went, and I had the job got, so my poor wife was left to unpack a Luton van while I had to, I had to do induction at a brand new job in Abbott in Sligo. But yeah, it was good. It was good. We never look back, as they say.
Mm,
I think that's always been something from my career. I've never looked back. I've never said, "Oh, I wish I hadn't made that decision."
mm,
Usually, I've been lucky in that all the decisions have been the right one. And I think that move was definitely right.
mm. And I just remember your colleague Davina saying that you were trying at some point to get someone to do something and it wasn't working out, and that's why you started the company. And I'm just wondering at what point that started happening because it doesn't necessarily appear obvious.
Well, it was COVID, would you believe? So I was,
Mm.
three kids at home and my wife, and COVID struck, and it was like you have to work from home. And I was, there's nowhere other than the living room or the kitchen table. So I had a tiny kid's desk in the corner of the living room, and I'm trying to work there. And kids would be coming in at 3 in the afternoon from school, and they might be wrestling in the hallway, and I just find it too distracting.
Harder
So I
than
rented
doing
an
the
office above an
harder than
estate
doing the
agent.
MSc alongside the full-time job.
Oh, that was before that. That was pre-COVID. But I
It was.
discovered that I could get a cheap office in the local village for nothing, next to nothing. The guy just wanted somebody to put the lights on and have heat in it, and because it was an empty office above an estate agent, and he was glad to get a few €100 for it, to rent it out.
Mhm.
And by the time I was in there and I was consulting for the company that I was working for at the time, I was like, well, it's not a massive step to set up my own limited company and go contracting myself. And then things just snowballed from there. I was juggling two contracts, both of which were getting busier. So I pulled in an ex-colleague that from not the previous job, the job before when I was in Abvie in Westport. I poached somebody from my old job there, and she started working one of the contracts, and I worked the other. And then 6 months later, we brought somebody else in, and it just sort of slowly built and slowly built, and slowly built, and
Mm.
we now we have double digit numbers of people, so it's great. We just organically grew over the last
Mm.
4 years.
Yeah. There was no sort of real vision to do that. It naturally just took off.
Um, well, I probably would have had a vision in the back of my head that I wanted to be, compete with some of the consultancy firms that I had dealt with and worked with in the past.
Mm.
Healthy competition.
Of course, yeah.
But
All
I
competition's
knew the
healthy.
industry, I knew the business. I was very lucky. I got a year and a half with a major consultancy firm in Ireland, and I really, really paid attention when I was there. Listened to how you bid for business, how you quote, how you do those scoping calls, how you talk to clients. Paid
Mm.
attention a lot to that, and brought it with me then when I set up myself.
Mm.
And also saw the things that maybe I wouldn't do. There were um, so put my own spin on it
Yeah.
as well.
And
And go into areas that.
can you say about the things that you perhaps wouldn't do?
Uh, so like risk aversion. One of the particular case I'm talking about, the company was very risk averse, I felt. Um, so I took more chances and hired people rather than using subcontractors, and really pushed to kind of create a team atmosphere where everybody was an employee and everybody felt. um and I mean, this I'm not saying that the previous company I worked for didn't value their staff. They were fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I did things slightly differently.
Mm.
I tried to make the atmosphere a bit more fun, a bit more. If you're coming to work every day, you should get up on the Monday morning going, great, I'm going to work, rather than, oh, it's Monday, I'm back at work.
Hmm. Hmm.
So try to make the company like that as much as I can. I hope everybody feels that way. We do sort of try and have touch points with everyone to make sure that, if there's anything we can do for them to make sure that their work life is as good as possible, we try to do that.
And that's the beauty of starting your own business. You can do it in your own
You can do it in your
footprint.
own
Yeah.
style.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we have a very sort of flat, circular, open structure where everybody talks to everybody, and there's look, I suppose ultimately they see me as the boss, but I try not to have too many bosses. It's more who can help you do the job, and who can provide you with the resources, and if that's somebody at the same level as you, so be it.
absolutely. I think that's a really productive way to a really productive
Mm.
attitude to have, actually, who can
Well,
get the best out of this situation. And
absolutely. Particularly when you're small, when you're single digits and moving into double digits numbers of employees, you don't have the luxury of, if you want to talk about validation, you can go and talk to Bob, or if you want to talk about, we don't have quite that luxury. So everybody has two or three hats. So that the tricky part is making sure that you don't have people who are overworked, or underutilized either. It's a nice fair balance, and just making sure that everybody has somebody that they can go and talk to about, and they know who are the experts about
Mhm.
different subjects. Who the SMEs for each thing, each
Mhm.
um I guess each service that we provide.
Right. So just on that, let's just unpick some of these acronyms, because most people will probably know, but maybe I don't. So just in case, um, we've got lots of QA and QC and QP and GDP and GCP, and even the company name is GXP. So
Yeah.
let's just go through those and check we all know what we're talking about.
Okay. So GXP is a catch-all term, and the X is meant is inverted commas, anything you want to put in there. If you like, the bread of the sandwich is the G and the P. That's good practices, and then you insert, the word, the middle word. So it can be good manufacturing practices. That's GMP. Good distribution practices. That's GDP. Good clinical practices. GCP. Good vigilance practices. GVP. So, um, typically, when a company is involved in regulatory, um, manufacture and import, batch release, distribution, and sometimes, like ourselves, we cover quite a lot in the clinical space as well. Then you don't want to be jumping back and forward between terms, so you just say GXP, and it's kind of known within the industry. Well, that's all of the good practices.
Mhm.
Um, you're into a whole bunch of regulations. Then when you say GXP, it's like, sometimes you do have, you'll be like, well, which GXP are you talking about here? So you have to revert back, you know. Yeah. So GMP, I suppose, is all of the Udrilics and Orange Guide type regulations. In the UK, there's guidance notes as well. And then in the EU, there's obviously all of the Udrilics regulations. So they're very prescriptive clauses that are, how you manufacture, how you test, how you release, how you import, how you distribute, all of that good stuff. So those chapters, if you like, have all the various clauses, and how you must conduct your business. So we provide expert advice into the pharma industry where they need to, maybe the regulations change, or they've had an awful inspection and they need help with their GMP, or even just like, just running their GMP system. Like they might have a huge vendor management program because they outsource everything, and it's unwieldy, and we can come in and help with that as well.
Mm, mm. And although you said you worked at that, was it? I shouldn't say the name of the other consultancy firm you worked for, but you it wasn't there that you really went full on into this type of work. It was a little bit sooner than that, wasn't it? It Allergen,
Um,
was it where you were more quality assurance and
I would have touched on it a little bit in Allergan. Yeah, I would have. Well, actually, all through my career would have been quality and regulatory. Even at, so Kent Athlone would have been the company before Allergan. I would have applied for MIA licenses. I would have completely wrote QMS. There was an entire QMS that needed to be written for one of the sites because it was applying for a new MIA license, all of that kind of stuff. So you're consultant. You don't realize you're doing consulting work. You
Hmm.
don't realize it until you join a consultancy and you were like, well, that's what I was doing in my previous job and the job before. And you're like, and then when I went to Allergan, there was dealing with the HPRA, dealing with the MHRA, submitting defect notifications and submitting batch specific variations and all of this kind of good stuff. And again, it's not until you go out and join a consultancy firm you're like, well, that's what I was doing, and
Yeah.
for the last 5 or 6 years, I just wasn't told it was consultant. It was just part of my day job.
Mm.
And so those skills were really transferable. And when you've been doing something for a decade, and you're told, well, you know, this is a skill that you can market to companies and you can charge them high billable hours rates for it. You're like, oh, okay, that's good, that's nice.
Indeed.
So we built a business around it, I guess.
Mm. And how often I mean, obviously there are major disruptions, like when a whole nation diverges from one set of regulation. But
Right.
yeah, for example. Um,
Yeah.
and but aside from obvious scenarios like that, how often do things get tweaked or adapted?
All the time. Yeah. There's a mantra within quality essentially, which is you should always be continuously improving. And it's one of it's even written into some of the GMP chapters. How do you achieve continuous improvement? And that's the whole your kappa root cause analysis, or sorry, your deviation root cause analysis kappa system. It's meant to drive continuous improvement because you're meant to say, well, how we did something wrong. We investigate, well, why did it go wrong? What was the root cause, and how do we fix that? And then you do verification checks even after that to verify, well, has it improved things? Do we need to revisit? Um, yeah, so
And what's the success rate when things are reviewed like that on whether something did in fact improve? Are there success rates? Are they even recorded, or is it very individual
well,
according to?
it's actually a bugbear for the inspectorates, and both the HPRA and the MHRA will often tell you that one of the problems companies have is they don't do verification. They don't verify effectiveness of their CAPAs. It's something that so many companies fall down on because it's like, oh, let's stick a couple of bullet points in that SOP. That's the quick fix,
Mhm.
and it doesn't fix anything. Or we'll retrain Bob and Mary and because they dropped something, or they made a mistake and didn't fill a batch record in right, and it's completely not effective. So the industry is getting a lot better now at the entire investigation process. So around things like complaints, um, market compliance notifications, deviations during manufacture. Companies are now going, okay, when something doesn't go exactly how it's supposed to go, they're really honing in a lot more on investigating that and going, how do we poke a yoke? How do we put in place a permanent fix? Error proof it, if you like. So maybe you have a form that somebody has to fill out. Companies are now starting to say, well, can we think completely outside the box? Can we get rid of the form and have something automated that replaces that can never go wrong, rather than just going, oh, well, you know, the person didn't tick the box on that part of the checklist, so we'll make them put their initials in, and it doesn't actually fix the problem in that the form doesn't work,
Mm.
or it's not used at the point of use, or the companies are thinking a lot more now about how do we make sure that nothing can go wrong here, rather than just putting a band-aid on it, if you like.
Mm. I suppose now we're moving into this new cobotics era. We'll be able to come up
Ooh.
with a few automated solutions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We were just myself and my colleague Patricia were just at the QP forum the other day there, and cobotics was one of the was was one of the presentations, and it was to do with visual inspection, and they were trying to use cobotics to remove um ambiguity. I think it
Hmm.
was I'm paraphrasing here, but there was, it was removing that subjectiveness, if you like, from a visual inspection process where you're looking for particulates in a sterile liquid fill. It's a very interesting, um, it's a very interesting subject and very interesting way that the industry is going, I guess.
Mm, mm. And if you had your way, how do you think you would change it? That kind of crosses over with the question I'd ask at the end.
Is that about AI, is it? Or
I think, well, I suppose, yeah, more specifically to AI, if you could choose, we should use it in this way. What way would
I'm
that be?
very skeptical about AI because we have spent the last 30 years ensuring that a human makes a decision about our medicines, ensuring that there's a qualified person there. And the 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 inspectorates, the MHRA, they go through the entire Viva process to make sure that the person who makes the decision about your medicines is qualified to make that decision, knows exactly how the medicine works, knows how it was manufactured, knows how it should be labeled, and is carrying out checks with their actual human eyes. I'm incredibly skeptical that we just hand all that over to AI. Um, yes, AI can help with management consultancy type decisions, things like operational excellence, that kind of stuff, where you look for efficiencies in systems and stuff. But the actual job of the QP of releasing a batch, I don't think should ever be handed over to artificial intelligence unless we, in some future state, decades down the line, get to the point where we trust them more than we trust the human.
Mm,
Um, will we ever do that? How do you validate it as well? How do you validate, all these complex algorithms that are going on in the background that make decisions based on, multiple divergent pathways. That sometimes if there's thousands of decision points in there and the AI comes to a conclusion, well, how do you validate that? Do you go through every single decision point and test, if it's one way or the other? Will the AI make the right decision? I don't know. I can't see it, to be honest. I
mm,
can see it in general consultancy, general management consultancy, operational excellence, right throughout the industry, streamlining, all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there has to be a human somewhere that signs the batch release certificate that says, I would let my children take this medicine, I know it's safe.
yeah, yeah. I think when you put it like that, I think a great number of people would agree with you.
I
Um,
think so. Yeah. I guess it's a debate I'd love to have with a lot of, in an open forum, but I, I, s- I sort of suspect a lot of people would come out on the side, of no, let's not hand everything over to Skynet, let's just,
right.
at least have somebody who has their finger on the button and, let's pause here and let a human decide that.
I think where artificial intelligence can support and assist the human, that's a
Mm,
positive thing. But yes, as you say, the human having the final say is it's gonna take a lot to change that. And you can sort of almost see a future unfolding where the AI consistently
mm,
gets it wrong, and people are so reliant on the
yeah,
machine that it
yeah.
takes a while and a great ordeal, in fact, to actually question the machine,
And
to
I
even
think the
undo
cost
it all.
I think, yeah, absolutely. And I think the cost of validating it all as well will be a barrier. I mean, I remember in the 90s, the chat was all about electronic batch records. And all by the year 2005, you'll walk into a pharmaceutical factory and there won't be any paper. Well, guess what? It's now 2025 and you walk into a pharmaceutical plant, there's plenty of paper, believe me. Yes, EBRs are a thing. If you have a straightforward linear process, you can probably quite simply, use a manufacturing execution system and set up an electronic batch record. But there's an awful lot of companies out there that just said, well, the paper system's there, it's not broke. And are we going to spend, hundreds of thousands qualifying an EBR system, or are we just going to, spend, 1,000 a year on paper?
Mm.
A lot of them have just stuck with the paper because it, there's no particular added benefit of switching to the EBR other than you don't use as much paper and you don't have to have a human checking it then quite as much. You can error proof EBRs where it does calculations within and it'll stop if if an addition isn't correct or that kind of thing. But the other way hasn't failed either.
No, I think error proofing is tempting probably for a few people. Um,
Yeah.
so look, Charlie, just before we finish, and without having that complete focus on AI, if you could change anything about the future of science, or what are your hopes for the future of science? I think either or really. If let's go with if you could change one thing to make it better.
If I could change one thing, um, I think I have two or three times across my career, I've came across companies where quality's taken a back seat. And it's always been the bottom line, volume, how fast can we make it, how quick can we get it out, how many steps in the process can we cut out. So it's got, we're contracting contractor A to make the API, contractor B to fill the product, somebody else to label it. I think I would love to see it, and I mean it is legislated. I mean the regulations and the guidance are there, and companies have to follow it. But quite often they don't, and then they wait until they have a bad inspection, and then all of a sudden quality is really important to them. I would love to see a future where the you know the finance manager, the quality manager, the HR manager, the operational excellence manager all carry equal weight. It doesn't matter, and the regulatory manager as well.
Hmm.
When the CEO is asking them questions, he's not only focusing on the bottom line, and I only care what the finance director's telling me. He cares what the quality manager is telling him. He cares what, or she, sorry, that sounded terribly sexist. He or she cares about what all of that team's telling them, and including quality and including regulatory.
Mm.
That's what I'd like to see, I think.
And I think that would be fair across the board. Doesn't even need to be in science necessarily.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Quality
we're
first.
all consumers. We're all consumers.
Mhm.
Um, and everybody has either an elderly relative or a child or something that at some point is going to need an antibiotic or some important medication, and you want to be able to trust it. You want to be able to go, I go into my chemist and go, there's my prescription, and you don't even have to think about it. That's where we want to be. And there have been a few scandals lately as well with drug mix-ups and recalls and stuff, so it does make you aware of what happened in that company. Why did that fail?
Mm.
There was an aspirin and paracetamol mix up there. Now that's, if you took a few aspirin where you were meant to take paracetamol, it probably isn't going to kill you. But what if that had been an oncology medicine or some really critical you know, life-defining medicine that you have to take, and it was mixed up with something else? Then a patient could be harmed. So it's really important that quality, regulatory, all of that gets an equal footing with everything else as part of a business.
Mm. We'll have to have a chat in a few years' time to see if you think that we've made any progress in that department.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Charlie, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
No worries. Thank you, Harriet.
Did you enjoy that episode of Lab Matters? If you did, please do send it to the people that you think will enjoy it the most.